The Boxcar Children, Blue Bay Mystery by Gertrude Chandler Warner. Chapter 11. Peter. Back at the cave, Mike was saying, "You can have another turn, Ben. I'm coming down." But of course Benny did not answer. He was not there. "Goodness!" cried Jessie. "Where is Benny?" They began to call, "Benny, Benny!" They all listened. "I hear a funny noise over that way," said Violet, pointing. "It sounds like Benny. He is in trouble." The children crashed through the bushes and over rocks. They were calling Benny all the time, and suddenly, right before their eyes, they saw a strange sight. Benny and a stranger were sitting on the edge of a deep hole. "Oh, Benny, are you hurt?" cried Jessie. "Not at all," said Benny. "This is Peter. I fell into his trap and he pulled me out." Henry came and sat down by the boys. He said to Peter, Have you been all alone on this island?" "Yes," said Peter. "I've been alone for about 3 weeks." "3 weeks!" cried Henry. "How do you know?" "I cut some marks in a tree. Mr. Anderson was with me at first. He cut the marks for 6 months. So after he went, I cut them myself, one every day." "Who was Mr. Anderson?" asked Jessie. "He was a sailor," said the boy. "Our ship hit a reef and went down. I was in a lifeboat with Mr. Anderson and we came to this island. We were together for 6 months and Mr. Anderson went swimming and I never saw him again." "So you have been here almost 7 months?" said Jessie. "That's right," said Peter. "How in the world do you get along alone?" asked Jessie. "Oh, I get along fine," said Peter. "I just do what Mr. Anderson did." "Tell me something, Peter," said Mike. "How did you happen to make your bed in the cave?" "Oh, I thought it would be fun," said Peter. "Once I read about some children who were all alone. Then it rained so hard I had to get somewhere out of the rain. Those rocks made a fine roof. I used to sit and watch the rain before you came to the island." Henry whispered to Benny, Don't tell him about us now. Later you can." Mike looked at Peter and said, Did you take our crackers that day?" Peter looked upset. "I am sorry about that," he said. "I have been here so long and everything was free. I could take anything I wanted, bananas, fish, coconuts, oysters, crabs and cane sugar. When I saw the crackers, I took those too." "It's all right," said Mike. "Nobody thinks I took them now." Henry said, "Peter, why didn't you call out to us before? Were you afraid of us?" "Yes, I was," said Peter. "Mr. Anderson said I must keep very still if I saw anyone on this island. I mustn't let anyone know I was here." "I suppose he meant dangerous men like cannibals," said Henry. "But there aren't any more cannibals around here." "I didn't know," said Peter. "You might be dangerous. I have watched you for a long time and now I know you are all right." "A good thing we found you," said Henry. "We know you can take care of yourself," said Jessie, "but you can live with us and have some of our food. And we are going away soon. Don't you want to go along?" "Yes, I do," said Peter. "I miss my father and mother. And I used to live near Boston." "We'll take you to Boston," said Benny, "just as soon as our ship comes, and we'll find your mother and father for you." "Here, old fellow," said Henry. "Don't promise. We'll try, and if anyone can find your parents, grandfather can." Mike said, "Look how brown you are, Peter." "Oh, I'm just sunburnt. I have been living in the sun for so long." "Come on, Peter," said Henry. "We'll take you to see Lars and my grandfather." Peter did not ask who they were because he knew very well. He said, "I watched you the day you came to the island. My, I was scared when I saw the ship. I watched you when you found the turtle shell. I heard every word you said. I watched you find my boat and I was afraid you would take my boat away." "Yes, we heard you whine and moan," said Benny. "I thought someone was in trouble and it was you." The family began to walk back to the houses. Jessie said, "Didn't you almost forget how to talk, Peter?" "Oh, I always talk to myself," said Peter. "I talk all day until you came, and then I had my bird to talk to." "What can he say?" asked Mike. "She," said Peter. Old Mina is a girl. She says good morning and good night and hello, Peter, and thank you and yes and no and happy birthday and look out, it's hot. I can see she is quite a talker, said Henry. She must be a lot of company for you. Yes, I love old Mina. That's her name because Mr. Anderson said it was a mynah bird. Isn't it better to have people for company, Peter? Asked Violet. Oh, yes, said Peter. That is why I came to help Benny out of my trap. I thought the time had come, and you were all alone without the others. It's wonderful, said Jessie. Won't Grandfather and Lars be surprised? But just then Lars was going very fast and very quickly back to the house. When the children came home, Lars was sitting there on top of the hut, still fixing the roof. Lars, shouted Benny, see what we found. Our mystery. Lars looked up and saw Peter. Oh, a boy, Lars said. Where did you find him? Mr. Alden, come and see this boy. Mr. Alden came to the door and looked out. It's Peter, Grandfather, said Henry. He has lived here for 6 months. Mr. Alden tried to wake up. He thought he was dreaming. He said, 6 months? How could he? He lived just the way we do, said Benny, only he never had any crackers or milk or meat. Lars said, now, Peter, come and sit down and tell us about this. Did you come in that lifeboat that is all filled with sand? Yes, sir, said Peter. Mr. Anderson and I came in it 6 months ago. Lars and Mr. Alden looked at each other. Then Mr. Alden came and sat down too. He said, Peter, I'd like to know more about the shipwreck. I suppose it was a shipwreck. Can you bear to tell me? Oh, yes, said Peter. I'd like to. Maybe it won't seem so bad if I tell someone. There was a terrible storm in the middle of the night. We were all seasick. Then the ship hit a reef and began to go down. The sailors got 3 lifeboats over the side. I was in one of them with my mother and father and Mr. Anderson. Then some others got in and the boat tipped over. Everybody went into the water. I couldn't see a thing. Do you think your parents were saved? Asked Mr. Alden gently. I don't know, said Peter. Maybe. But it was very dark, you know. I was going down and suddenly I felt Mr. Anderson lift me into a boat again. And when I woke up, I was here. I never saw any other boat after that. Your parents think you were lost then, said Grandfather. Yes, I'm sure they do, if they were saved. Lars said some people got picked up because the papers said that they were taken to San Francisco. Is that so? Said Peter. He looked at Lars quickly. Maybe my father and mother were saved, but they would never know about me. Mr. Anderson and I never saw any ship. The wreck must have been quite far away, said Grandfather. Yes, it was, because Mr. Anderson told me he rowed a whole day and a night and didn't think anyone would ever come. I wish you would cut my hair. Henry can cut hair very well, said Mike. Violet took her scissors out of her work bag and gave them to Henry. Henry began to cut. He said, You better save this long hair, Peter. Some day you'd like to see it. Then he cut Peter's hair like Mike's. You look fine now, said Peter. You did well to live on your own. You live alone, Peter, said Lars. I think you are very brave. I had to be, said Peter. I'm sorry about my clothes. Don't they look terrible? Everyone had noticed what Peter was wearing. He looked very strange. He was wearing lots of big leaves that were tied with brown strings, and many more brown strings hung down. I got some strings off coconuts, said Peter, and I tied leaves together. One time I lost a button when I washed my clothes. Then they just wore out. Mike got up. He ran down to the box. He came back at once and held out his hand to Peter. Peter took one look. Then he cried, My button! I lost it in a pool right down there, he pointed. I never could find it. You couldn't find it because our fish ate it, said Mike. Then we ate the fish. May I have my button? I'd love to keep it. Grandfather got up. Yes, Peter, keep it, he said. Henry, go and fix up some of your clothes for Peter. He will feel better if he looks better. The two boys went into the house at once. Soon they came back. Peter looked like a different boy. Henry said to Lars, "When do you think the sea star will come back?" Well, well, said Lars, "this is the first time anyone has said one word about the sea star. She may come any time now." Jessie said, "You see, we didn't want to leave Blue Bay, and now we do. We want to find Peter's father and mother." "I've almost forgotten what they look like," said Peter, "but I will know them." Grandfather said quietly, "What is your last name, Peter?" "Peter what?" "Horn," said Peter. "Horn," shouted Benny and Mike and Benny at once. "Our teacher," said Benny. "That was our teacher's name too. I knew it made me think of cows." "Cows?" asked Jessie. "What are you talking about?" "Well, cows have horns," said Benny. "Oh dear," laughed Jessie. "You are the funniest boy." "Peter Horn," said Mr. Alden slowly. He was thinking. "My father's name is Peter Horn too," said Peter. "That will help, my boy," said Mr. Alden. "We'll try to find them, but you understand they may not be alive, don't you?" "Oh yes," said Peter. "I was just thinking what would I do if we went home and we didn't find them." "Don't worry about that, Peter," said Henry. "You can live with us and be part of our family." Peter could not believe his eyes when everyone smiled and nodded, even Mr. Alden himself. Chapter 12. 8 in the Family. Grandfather was thinking. He said, "Benny, you must not think that Peter's mother is your teacher just because she had the same name. There are many people named Horn." Lars said, "What happened to Mr. Anderson?" "I don't know," said Peter. "He said he was going swimming near a sandy beach, but he never came back." "Do you mean a very green bay?" asked Mike. "No, I mean the one on the other side of it, where the boat is." Nobody said a word, but everyone thought, "Shark Bay. How lucky we were to have Lars with us." Jessie said suddenly, "Are you hungry, Peter?" "Not very," said Peter, "but you do have some more crackers, don't you? You see, they make me think of bread, and I haven't had bread for 6 months." "6 months!" cried Violet. "That's why I took the crackers, Mr. Lars," said Peter. "That's all right," said Lars. "Don't worry." "I did worry," said Peter, "when I saw you were blaming that other boy." "Me?" said Mike. "Yes, Mike, I'm awfully sorry." "Think nothing of it," said Mike. "Come on, Ben." The two boys raced for the sea biscuit. It was such fun to see Peter eat crackers. He seemed half starved. "Wait until you see what we have for supper," said Benny. "We're going to have stew and a pudding." "A pudding? Oh, yes, I remember what a pudding is," said Peter. He stopped eating for a minute. "A pudding is sweet." "Yes," said Mike. "Ours is made of coconut milk, sugarcane and bananas." "Sounds good," said Peter. "My mother used to cook good things. Hope we can find her." "Well, if Grandfather can't find her, nobody can," said Benny. "He has ways." Mike said suddenly, "You can have my blankets, Peter." Peter said, "You are a very kind boy, Mike, but I wouldn't know what to do with a blanket. I can sleep on a rock. I am hard all over." "You must show us how to climb trees," said Henry. "It's easy," said Pete, "if there is something you want at the top of a tree." Mr. Alden was listening to all this. He was wide awake now. He watched Peter carefully. A good boy, he thought. Just think of one of our children living here for 6 months. He shook himself. He had a plan which he did not tell to anyone, but he told them all. Now we have 8 in the family. It was a happy family at supper. Lars gave his spoon to Peter and took a big cooking spoon himself. They all began to eat meat stew. All at once a voice said, "Look out, it's hot." "Who said that?" cried Mark. "It's old Miner," said Peter. He made a funny noise with his mouth, and down flew a dark purple bird. It had white on its wings and orange on its head. "Hello, Mona," said Peter. "Hello, Peter," said Mona. "Or Miner?" "Oh, make him say something about me," begged Mike. "Her," said Peter. He took the bird on his finger and said, "Miner, say, 'What's the matter, Mike?'" The bird said nothing. "She won't talk for us," said Benny. She is afraid." "Oh, no, she's not afraid," said Peter. "She has to study every new word." Peter said it again 2 or 3 times. He fed the bird a piece of meat. "Look out, it's hot," said Minah, when she went right along without stopping. "What's the matter, Mike?" Mike was delighted. "What a talker," he said. "Maybe we can teach her to sing." "Oh, she can sing already," said Peter. "Minah, sing 'My Country 'Tis of Thee.'" He hummed it. Sure enough, Minah sang it right after him. "She's wonderful," said Henry. "She's got a funny voice when she sings," said Mike. "So have some people," said Benny. "Her singing voice is different." Henry said, "Soon we'll have to think about the ship's coming. I mean, get our things ready. My shoes are almost worn out." "I never had any shoes here," said Peter. "I didn't have time to put them on the night the ship was wrecked. Feel my feet, Benny." Benny did so. "Oh, your feet are as hard as rocks. Really, Henry, feel them." Henry said, "Yes, they are, just like dog's foot." "You have been climbing trees and rocks for so long, Peter, it will be terrible for you to wear shoes." "Yes, but I like some new shoes," said Peter. "I used to dream of having new shoes." Then they tried the pudding. It was delicious. When supper was over, Peter began to teach them to climb trees. "Oh, you have to take off your shoes," he said. Henry tried it a few times and did very well. "It is much easier without shoes. Soon my feet will be as hard as yours, Peter." "That will take a long time," said Peter, "and I hope we won't stay here that long." When they went to bed that night, old Minah went to sleep first. For the first time in 3 weeks, nobody was watching from the trees. Out on the great ocean, the sea star was coming nearer and nearer. Captain Brown smiled to himself. He laughed when he thought of Benny and Mike. He didn't know that there was another boy now named Peter Horn. Chapter 13. Sea Star. Old Minah woke up first. She hopped out of the house and flew into the trees. She ate her breakfast and waited for the sun to come up. Then she began to call, "Wake up, sleepyhead!" It woke everyone. Benny laughed. "That's old Minah. She sounds like a real person." Lars and Henry went down to start the fire. "How grandfather does enjoy his coffee," said Henry as they walked along. "Not more than I do," said Lars, laughing. "That little girl Violet thinks of everybody." "Yes, she does," said Henry. "Now, what do you think about Peter's parents? Do you think they are alive?" "Who knows?" said Lars. "Some people were saved. They could be Peter's parents. Your grandfather will find them if they are alive." "Yes, grandfather is quite wonderful," said Henry. They were talking so hard that they never looked at the sea. They knelt down to build the fire. Along came the sea star, just the same, nearer and nearer, but nobody saw it as it steamed along. Just as the coffee began to boil over, Mr. Alden shouted, "Hey, Lars!" They looked up. Mr. Alden was laughing and pointing out to sea. "The ship!" cried Henry. "The Sea Star!" Benny and Mike came racing down to the beach. They danced around on the sand, waving their arms. "They can't see you," said Henry. "Very soon they can," said Lars. "I wish we had a bigger coffee pot for company." Jessie said, "Never mind, Lars. They have coffee on the ship. Go ahead and drink this." "Who will come in the lifeboat, Lars? Will it be Captain Brown?" "No, I don't think Captain Brown will leave his ship. I think it will be the second mate." Lars was wrong that time. The Sea Star stopped outside Blue Bay and let down a boat. In the boat were the second mate and Captain Brown himself. As the boat came up with the waves, all the men pulled it up on the sand. "Well, Captain, this is good of you to come yourself," said Mr. Alden. Then the captain saw Peter. "Where did this boy come from?" he cried. "He was on the Explorer too, sir," said Lars. "Been here ever since the wreck." "We're going to find his parents," said Benny. "Grandfather is." "Now, Benny," said Henry. "Maybe he is," said Benny. "If he can, and he always can. The captain looked at Mr. Alden and started to say something. But Mr. Alden said quickly, "Let's all sit down, then we can talk. Have some breakfast." "Thanks, we just ate aboard ship," said the captain. "We'll watch you." "Oh, we'll have a neat time," said Benny, "but we want to go home now." "Yes, we do," said Mr. Alden. "Start back to San Francisco right away. I want to help this boy find his parents. Do you all want to go home?" "Oh, yes," said Jessie. "Oh, yes," said Violet. Peter said nothing, but his eyes were very bright. "Peter's going to cry," thought Benny, but Peter did not cry. He went over to Mr. Alden and held out his hand. Mr. Alden took it, and now Grandfather's going to cry, thought Benny. But Mr. Alden did not cry either. He just said, "Hard as a rock. What a hard hand. But maybe hard work kept you happy. Work is good. Remember that, my boy." "How long will it take you to get ready, sir?" asked the captain. "Not long. We haven't anything to pack." "Not so fast, my boy," said Mr. Alden. "You surely want to take Mike's turtle kettle, and we must take our plates and spoons." "Let's take Peter's dishes too," said Jessie. "And old Miner," said Peter. "Oh, yes, old Miner," said Henry. "Can you catch her, Peter?" "I can catch her, but she won't like the ship. She will fly away." "How about that, Captain?" asked Mr. Alden. "Do you have a bird cage?" "No, but I have a crab trap." Mr. Alden went on. "Another thing, Captain. Have you your secret camera?" "Oh, yes, I always have that." "Well, Henry will go with you, and you take some pictures of the waterfall and the spring and the statue." "And Peter's cave," said Benny. "Yes, surely, get a picture of that up close. Then take the Explorer 2 lifeboat and be sure to get the name on it. Then come back and take a picture of our huts and one of all of us," said Jessie. "I'll take that now," said the captain, laughing. "Stand close together." And just before he took the picture, down flew old Miner. So Peter had the bird on his finger in the picture, and everyone was laughing. Off went Henry and the captain. Lars began to pack the boxes. "You boys can help me," he said. "I'm too homesick," cried Mike. "I don't want to leave Blue Bay. Oh, and I don't want to go home." "Yes, you do," cried Benny. He jumped up and said, "More coffee, Grandfather?" "Thank you, Benny. The last drop is the best. Come here, Mike." Mike went over, and he put his hand on Mr. Alden's knee and said, "I've had a beautiful time, Mr. Alden. I don't want it to end." "Let me talk to you, Mike. It isn't going to end. Think of taking Peter home. You will always have a good time, my boy. Just take things as they come. Remember, I will always help you. Like I try to like everything, even ends." "I'll try," said Mike. "I do like most things." "I know you do. Good boy." Peter went to work then, filling boxes. "I hope those pictures come out all right, Ben," he said. "Won't it be fun to look at them when we are at home?" Soon everything was packed. Henry and Captain came back and took pictures of the 2 huts. "All packed except old Miner," said Jessie. The second mate put the crab track on the sand. Peter put a berry inside, and Miner walked in. Peter shut the door. "Neat," said Benny. Lars put out the fire with seawater. Then the men pulled both boats down to the water. "I'll take Mr. Alden with me," said the captain. He winked at Mike. "We want to talk." "Well," said Benny, "that's all right. We want to talk too." Chapter 14. Home. As the 2 boats went through Blue Bay, Captain Brown took a picture of the beach. He said, "That will show the fireplace and the 2 houses. And now I'm ready to make any plans you want, Mr. Alden." "Well, first maybe Peter's parents were not safe, but I will do everything to find out. So this is my plan." By the time the boats reached the Sea Star, the plan was made. The crew was waiting at the rail. They were all laughing. They helped the family out of the lifeboat and carried the turtle kettle up on the deck. The captain went at once to the radio room. Mr. Alden sat down and looked around. "Oh, another cup of coffee," he said. He took it from the sailor. "Thanks very much." Just think of having a saucer, said Benny. Oh, Grandfather, he's bringing some toast. The children looked hard at the toast. Buttered toast, yelled Mike. He could hardly get the words out. Mr. Alden looked at Peter. Then he began to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with Lars. Will you bring a whole loaf of buttered toast, please? He said. These children would like lots of bread and butter. Think of that. When it came, Peter looked at it. I can't believe it, he said. But when the captain came back, all the children ate as if they were starved. That's all we want, said Henry. Bread. Peter said, I'll never eat bread again without being thankful. Then Mr. Alden said, after this, don't go into the radio room. You used to go and talk with Bill, but now don't. The captain noticed that nobody said why. He thought, and that's all there is to it. I wish all people behaved as well as that. The Sea Star was going at full speed. Bill went in and out of the radio room very often. He always took a yellow paper to Mr. Alden. Grandfather would say a few words and Bill would go back. Now we'll show you the ship, Peter, said Benny. When they all came back on deck, Grandfather said, your lessons begin again this afternoon, even Peter, and this time you will each write a book about this trip. Write a book, cried Jessie. What fun! Write a book, said Mike. I can't write a book. You'll have to if Grandfather says so, Mikey, old boy, said Benny. I'll bet your book will be the best and the funniest of all. It was. Mike kept them all laughing as he read each page. The children kept busy, but they longed to get home. After many days, a loud bell rang. All the children jumped up and ran up on deck. I thought that loud bell would get you, said Grandfather. Good news, Peter. You mean Peter's father? Whispered Mike. Yes, his father and mother are alive. They will be waiting for us at the dock in San Francisco. Oh, my, said Peter. Now you can all read the radiograms. The last one just came. It says, Son, Peter Horn, last seen in lifeboat from Explorer 2. My own father sent that, said Peter. Yes, he signs his name, Peter Horn. Henry put his arm around Peter and said, Come on, old boy, and sit down on the bench. Benny and Mike sat down on the other side. And we land tomorrow, said Mr. Alden. I hope I can live till tomorrow, said Benny. They all lived until tomorrow. They were very much excited when they began to see land. San Francisco came nearer and nearer. They went under the Golden Gate Bridge. Soon they saw the dock. There were crowds of people waiting for ships. Oh dear, said Jessie. I suppose we must say goodbye to the crew. They all shook hands with Captain Brown and the sailors. But then they came to Lars. Violet looked up at Lars and said, How can we say goodbye to you, Lars? Mike said, Maybe we'll never see you again. But Lars smiled at Violet and said, You'll see me again, all right. I often come your way. Come to dinner, said Benny. Come any time. We'll have beans for you. Just then Peter began to shout, Oh, I see my mother and my father. They are there, waving. Is that your mother? Yelled Benny. It is not our teacher. It doesn't even look a bit like her. I was sure you boys would be disappointed about that, said Grandfather. I don't care, said Benny. The neat thing is that she's Peter's mother. At last they were all on the dock. Hi, Mother, cried Peter. I thought I would never see you again, said Mrs. Horn. Mr. Horn took Peter's hand to help him up the steps to the street. Don't help Peter, Mr. Horn, said Mike. He laughed. Peter can climb right up the side of a house. Peter was not too happy wearing shoes, but he did very well. Mr. Alden looked at Mr. Horn and said, Let's go to some quiet place. We'll have lunch and then we'll all take the plane east. I never can thank you enough for bringing Peter home, said Mr. Horn. Don't try, said Mr. Alden. There are some taxis. Everyone get in. Or here are some taxis. Everyone get in. Very soon they were all sitting at the big table for lunch. "Oh, peanut butter!" cried Benny. "I thought I'd never see you again." "Is that what you want?" said Mr. Alden. He laughed. All of them wanted peanut butter. "Think of that, Mr. Horn," they said. "What they want peanut butter when they could have almost anything in the world." Peter's father and mother were told all about Blue Bay. Peter's mother said, "At last we have found Peter. I never really gave up hope of finding him." "Grandfather finds lots of things," said Benny. "Now, where will Peter live?" "Peter will live near Boston. This is a picture of our house," said Mr. Horn. He took out a picture. "A nice little place," said Mike. "Nice trees to climb, but no banana trees." "No," said Mr. Horn, laughing. "We have no banana trees." After lunch they all took the plane. Everyone on the plane smiled to see the happy group. They talked all the time. Mike and Benny walked up and down. They told passengers about the island and all about Peter. Mike did not want to get off at Chicago, but when he saw his mother and his brother Pat, he changed his mind. "And my teacher," he yelled. "My teacher came to meet me. I bet she doesn't know that bananas grow up and not down." "That's our Mike for you," said Henry. He patted Mike's shoulder. "Next year you'll be teaching your teachers, Mike." At last the plane landed in Boston. They all got off the plane. Then they had to say goodbye to Peter. "We'll come to see you often," said Henry. Mr. Horn carried old Miner's cage. Old Miner said, "What's the matter, Mike?" Benny laughed and laughed. He said, "That shows that old Miner doesn't know what she says. She just talks." "Mike's gone," said Miner. She looked right at Benny. "What do you know?" said Henry. "What do you know?" said Miner. "Let's go, Mother," said Peter. "Next thing old Miner will say, 'Look out, it's hot.'" "Well, it is hot, sure enough," said Benny. They all watched Peter go out of the door of the airport. Henry took a long breath. He said, "Grandfather, we can never thank you enough for this wonderful trip." "Don't try, my boy," said Mr. Alden. I've had a pretty good time myself." The Alden family reached home. Watch began to bark. He was so glad to see his family again. Mr. Alden began to sing, "East, West, home is best." Benny hugged Watch. He said, "Well, that's right, Grandfather. Home is best, but Blue Bay was pretty neat too. Let's go somewhere else next year." Mr. Alden smiled at Benny, but all he said was, "Maybe." The children were very happy. They all knew that with Grandfather, maybe almost always meant yes.